What is your "oh crap, that child is evil and twisted" moment? When I was 3 to 4, my cousin visited me. She was 8 to 10 at the time and stayed with us for a weekend. That weekend, after I told her I had named the squirrels in our garden, she tried to hit them with stones, attempting to kill them while telling me she wanted them dead. When I had a tick, I whined a little because I was afraid removing it would hurt. Not only did she tell me to shut up and stop being a baby, but she also started slamming doors in our house because my mother gave me more attention while removing the tick than her. She refused to eat anything because she only ate a few specific things and would throw food on the table. While I was making a bracelet with some pearls I had collected, she tried to swallow them so I couldn't use them. She also hit and scratched me multiple times. All of this happened in just one weekend. Needless to say, my mother was completely occupied with her. After the weekend, her parents came and basically said, "Yeah, normally she's only allowed to stay over once." They also told my mother that whenever she threw a fit, they would lock themselves in their room and just hope that whatever she damaged wasn't expensive to replace. Years later, by the time she was 16, her parents were completely exhausted. It turned out she had major psychological problems, no guidance, no discipline, and was bullied at school a lot. She developed anorexia and had to stay at a clinic for a few months. I saw her again when she was 19. She was a completely different person and loved playing with us kids. She now trains service dogs for a living. She was the most evil child I ever met, but I'm glad she changed and got the help she needed. I used to be friends with a lady whose toddler was just wrong. I'm not sure if it was nature or nurture because she absolutely spoiled the little kid to death. She would never give him consequences for his actions. At first it was little things, like picking the cat up and squeezing them too hard. Then he went on to do things like hit people, adults, with his toys on purpose. It's hard to describe, but even the way he carried himself and reacted to things just didn't feel right. I had him on my lap one time, and he reached out with both hands and squeezed my bobos just as hard as he could. He was only 3 or 4 years old then. And while the argument could be made that he didn't understand the implication of the body part he was grabbing, I can say with 100% certainty that he intended to make me feel pain. His face was a mix of anger and malicious glee. Several people in our friend group tried to tell the lady that something was up with her son, me included. But she would hear nothing negative spoken about her precious little boy. She even went so far as to throw people out of her house for suggesting that he had issues. I cut her out of my life shortly after this. 20 years later, I saw her son's picture on the local sex offender website. He's serving a life sentence in prison for rape of a minor. A friend of mine is a single mother. When the kid was less than 4 years old, she was dating a guy. He was nice with the kid, but sometimes they had some conflicts because the kid was spoiled. Sometimes he wasn't well received because of that. She lived with her family. I was there and BF came to visit. Her mother made dinner and the BF went out to buy sodas for everybody. When he came back, the kid asked for soda. BF told him to wait until dinner was served, which was about to happen. The kid didn't want to wait and hit the BF, or better said, threw something at him, I don't remember exactly what it was, and demanded, "Give me soda." BF was upset and told him because of his behavior, he won't have any soda. The kid threw himself on the floor and began to scream, saying that BF hit him. My friend came running and told BF to leave, not before telling him if he hit the boy, she will crush him. BF tried to explain the situation, but she didn't allow it. BF leaves. When BF leaves, the kid smiled in a way I can only describe as diabolical. When my friend got back to check on the kid, he was whinnying again and putting an act holding her. As I saw everything, I waited after dinner when she calmed down and I told her what happened. It is easy to guess that the relationship didn't last much more after this, and others to come because of the same reason. When I was in 8th grade, we would walk home from junior high on the days it was nice. Being 13-year-olds, we would take the long way and stop at our friends' houses along the way to see what was going on. way before cell phones were a normal thing, so stopping by was our preferred method. Anyway, we saw a friend of ours had dropped his bike in front of another kid's house that we all knew. He wasn't anyone's favorite person, but he sort of wormed his way into the fold of friends. We could hear noise in the backyard, so we went around the corner of his house just in time to see him take his brother's guinea pig out of his cage, soak it in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. The way he laughed and cackled will be with me for the rest of my life. He was rolling on the ground laughing as the poor thing ran around. I'm not a big believer in evil as a blanket statement about somebody, but that dude was evil as hell. Never spoke to him or our other friend who was with him again. This story doesn't end as badly as it starts, but when I was in middle school, my 6-year-old brother put our cat in the clothes dryer and turned it on. She was in there for a minute or two, until we heard the thumping and her awful yowling. We took her out and cooled her down immediately, gave her water, and watched her intently until she recovered, fully by the way. But all of us were shocked at what had just happened, mainly because we all were well aware about the implications of a child who starts torturing animals. My brother is autistic, and at this point in his life had only recently been speaking in his own words, instead of echolalia, and he was scared that he was in trouble. But eventually, we got the story. He had seen the cat poop, so he gave her a bath in the sink. She was wet, so he put her in the dryer. It was so relieving to realize the connections his brain had made to lead to what happened, instead of him just deciding to murder our pet. We told him clearly that being in the dryer will kill you, including pets and humans. Also, cats don't usually need baths, and a parent will help if the cat needs help with bathing. Ironically, as an adult, he has shown some worrying behaviors that have made us concerned about the safety of others around him, which I won't go into the details of. But the cats remain his most favorite family members, and honestly, pretty much the only lives that he shows care and affection for. Which I guess is kind of reassuring. For the cats anyway. I was working retail, and this little cherub of a kid was in the store with his grandma. He was nice throughout the store. He was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I was bagging their items, and he was watching me very intently, like, yeah, okay, a little weird, but whatever. At this particular store, we had a bag carousel that spins, and he was watching me put their items away. He very suddenly got this evil smirk on his face. I don't know how else to describe it, except it was like a demon had possessed him. He looked so mean. It was creepy enough that my fight or flight kicked in, and I was pretty alarmed. Immediately after this, he grabbed the bag carousel and spun it very quickly while my hands were in the way in order to hit me with it, so I'd get hurt. I've never seen a look like that on someone's face since, especially not a child. It was bizarre. One of my classmates in 8th grade was an absolute terror and acted out a lot, though she was always nice to me, even offered me some vodka out of her water bottle once. She made a bomb threat that meant we had to spend the whole day outside on the football field. But the really diabolical stunt was putting super glue on a toilet seat right before some poor girl went into the stall. If memory serves, that girl didn't come out, but a lot of EMTs went in. I can't believe she didn't get expelled. Probably the only reason she didn't was that we were the only school in our rural area, other than the Catholic school. And they definitely didn't want her, lol. Now she has like 4 kids and runs her own daycare and is super friendly. Friend of mine has 3 boys that are too smart for their own good. One evening, he was watching TV and the 7-year-old came in and started talking about the family dog. He then asked, "Did you have pets as a kid? And what were their names?" Later, the 9-year-old came in and started talking about cars and asked his dad what was his first car. Later, the 11-year-old came in and asked when his dad graduated and where. This went on all evening until it finally clicked in my friend's mind. He went to check on the kids, and they were on the computer trying to get access to some shopping site by answering the challenge questions. What was your first pet? Etc. My neighbor's brother, around 9 to 10, was tackling her to the point where she couldn't breathe and almost passed out. My mom had to get him off of her. He was so smug, he knew exactly what he was doing, and it was like you could see the devil in his eyes. Then one day, both of their parents were gone. Dad was a firefighter, and Mom went on a secret cruise, and she just left them there without telling him. The boy locked all of his sisters out of the house and chased them around the neighborhood with a knife. We had to hide them in our house until their mom came back home days later. No idea what happened to them. We moved not long after that. My late mom's sister has a daughter and a son. These cousins of mine used to delight in making up lies maliciously to drive a wedge between my mom and their mom. Also between me and their mom. I didn't know why my aunt started acting real cold and mean towards me and times towards my mom until we watched them one weekend and I overheard them plotting lies to tell their mom, like that we'd starved them. This was something they discussed after us making a baking sheet-sized pizza for the 4 of us, and they were perfectly well fed. Years later, I told my mom about when the boy was little and I was alone watching him while his mom and sister was doing some errands, and the kid wanted us to compare dicks. I was like 13, 14, and he was like 5 or something. I said no, of course, and left it at that. Didn't want to yell at him because kids are weird. Anyway, this came up like 20 years later when I offhandedly mentioned this to my mom in some context, and she went serious and said she's been told by her sister it was the other way around. So this kid was curious about bodies, I didn't go along, and then he told his mom I had wanted to and he said no, like, what the fluck? I was once at the beach and there was this boy hell-bent in crushing a crab that was full of eggs with a rock. We were observing the crab and he came in following. We asked him not to do it, but he still held on to his rock, and his mom showed up ready to throw hands if we dared to stop her little hellspawn. That boy literally had an evil grin in his face. The second we turned, we heard a heavy thud. The boy continued to grin and laugh at what he had done. But the boy was around 8-10. He definitely was old enough to know better. Lived in government housing, aka the projects, for about 5 years. There was this kid Kyle. He was maybe 4 or 5, Guadcam. You only saw him in a diaper. No other clothing, no matter the weather. I saw him walk through snow like that. He had a really wide, creepy grin and an unblinking stare. All the kids were terrified of him in that instinctual way kids can be when they sense something really bad. Kyle just walked slowly, like he was determined, in some random straight path. It's not like he was a predator that stalked you. He just existed in some weird trance-like state. Not blinking, grinning. Sometimes he'd stop, turn his head slowly and look at you, then move on. Just fucking unnatural and evil looking. If he went to the playground we had next to the complex, all the kids would leave. I never saw it, but other parents said that they caught him with dead animals, like birds, squirrels, we lived near a large park, smashing them repeatedly against trees and playground equipment. Some knew his parents and said they were drug addicts. No idea if that was all true. But yeah, you saw that kid, you just went the hell in the other direction. There used to be a kid on my street that thought it was funny to push the kid he was walking with in the street when a car was approaching. My husband got out of the car once to tell him that's dangerous. The kids laughed and seemed unbothered. He would also scream curse words at the top of his lungs. After a few months, I stopped seeing him. Don't know if he moved or what. Hopefully he stopped playing chicken with innocent kids. I had a kid who went to the doctor for a yearly checkup. Right before they went, they scratched themselves up and down their arms and neck and face. When asked what happened, they told the nurse that Miss Blank did it to me at school. That teacher had been on vacation that week, so we avoided an issue. But then, 2 weeks later, the kid broke their brother's femur, and when asked why they threw him down the stairs, they said, "I wanted to hear him scream." Chills, I'm so glad my info's private. I've managed a few properties with kids that I am certain will become serial killers. One used to sneak into the retention pond to kill frogs and then drape their dead bodies all over his bike and ride around with them until they decayed too much and fell off. He was 4 or 5 at the time. Found regularly in the pond after midnight during the week. No supervision, no friends whatsoever. and clearly had a number of unaddressed issues that could have benefited from early intervention. Buried, but goddamn, this was a big one. I was 19, camp counselor for 9 to 10-year-olds. One kid in the cabin was difficult, and on lake day he went on the blob. He got bounced up and then yelled that he was paralyzed. Lifeguards did their thing, kid was life-flighted out of the mountains. Big deal. Now, while this was happening, a kid who was severely allergic to bees and he got stung. A lifeguard, stressed already, grabbed the EpiPen and hit it in backwards, sending it in her thumb. That kid was fine, just kinda wild. Back to my kid. He came back from the hospital. He was not paralyzed, turns out. Long story shortened, we had a nighttime flashlight game, and he refused to stick with the group. Screamed grape a bunch, like a lot. As a victim of sexual child abuse, this one hurt me a lot. I was supposed to be the safest example of an older figure to look up to, depend on, trust. Now he's screaming rape around a bunch of people. When I met his parents afterwards, they said he wanted to apologize. He did not apologize, and I stopped volunteering being a camp counselor. I did it for 2 years because it was a lot of fun, but that kid ruined it for me. It was a dope little summer thing my friends and I did, and it counted for community service. I work with a 3rd grader, and I honestly see him as being some kind of murderer. Zero empathy, even his parents have noticed. I also had a brother, sister, and their adopted sister. Talking to the one sister about the adopted one, "She not my sister, she doesn't even look like me, she's adopted," and walked away when the sister was right there. Kids can be so cruel. Kid I went to school with. In grade school, he had a thing for hitting kids with rocks. He would hide rocks and snowballs during snowball fights. He would put rocks in his beanie, whip it around, and hit people in the head with it. I got hit with one of those. In high school, he would borrow his dad's gun to hunt neighborhood pets. He is in jail now, thankfully. Family friends adopted siblings from a 3rd world country. The boy is just fine, adjusted well. The girl is a sociopath. She sexually propositioned her adopted father when she was 10. She's 14 now and a terror. They're looking at options to unwind the adoption. They've done every program they can get her into. She can't be in the same home as the other children because she's tried to sexually assault all of them, including her own brother. I don't know what happened to her when she was a little girl. Obviously it was bad, but nothing has helped her. I used to teach this student who I would put in this category. He had an expressionless face, and he did awful things. One example that stands out is that he cornered a student during passing in the hallway, tied him to the staircase with his belt, and wrote "faggot" on his face with a lipstick. He had given him a really painful-looking wedgie. He was busted and suspended and later expelled for all manner of bullying and cruel behaviors. I saw his name in the paper just a few years later for assault. Haven't followed up on him since, but I recall his eyes. He had a dead sort of expression. He was unfathomable to me. Not my story, rather a story I read on here once, so maybe someone will remember. Not gonna quote it since I don't know it word by word, but the gist of the story is that OP and his friend, who is a girl, so OP is a guy, are in junior high and she invites him over since she actively liked him. Well, as a way to impress him, she has a big wall with paper and red splatters, claims it's an art project she's working on. She then grabs a hamster and just throws it to the wall as hard as she could. And that's the story. Don't recall what happened to the girl, but OP felt super uncomfortable, but didn't want to throw off the girl since she could be a threat and possibly harm him if he lost his shit. A child I know, not a relative but someone who is friends with a family member. It's their child. It's been years since my family member has spoken to them. Was showing the dark triad from about age 2. He tortured my niece's favorite toy because she wouldn't give it to him. He would deliberately try to make hazards so people would hurt themselves, such as pouring water on the floor so they'd slip or trying to trip them up. He especially liked to target pregnant women. By the age of 4, he wasn't allowed round to most people's houses anymore because he couldn't be trusted with their pets, children, or anything really. He was kicked out of school at age 6 for setting fires. He'd steal matches from anywhere he could get them, and being very cruel to other children. As far as we could tell, his siblings were very normal, did well in school. Social care were called in due to obvious concerns, but they found no issues with the parents or had any concerns for abuse. They ended up moving to the county over, as a specialist place had been found at a school for the boy. So at that point, my family member lost contact. Last thing I heard, he is now a teenager and in a secure unit because his behaviors just continued and escalated. I really wouldn't be surprised one day if I hear he's become a serial killer. One of the few kids who has truly made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Was it nature or nurture? Not sure I'll ever know. My mom was friends with our neighbor growing up, and she had a daughter a few years older than me and a baby the same age as my brother. Her daughter, who was 8 at the time, shoved me under the couch cushions and put them back on. I was 4 at the time, and I can kind of remember not being able to breathe. My mom was looking for me and found her jumping on the cushions, laughing. I was literally suffocating underneath. My mom flipped out and never let that family back into our house. She said she always got the worst feeling about that child. There were other instances of her trying to push boundaries, but that was the worst. Cousin was 5 when he found with his pants down with his naked 18-month-old female cousin in a closet. Later stabbed his brother in the head with a pencil. When he was 6 or 7, our great-uncle died. I drove my grandmother down to be with her sister, his widow. My older cousin C, 20F, arrived at the same time. We walk in and see the brat there. C and go the living room to catch up, and brat follows us. He goes into full monster mode and starts destroying a chair, so we told him to knock it off and sneers at us saying grandma's moving in with us and can't bring her stuff anyway. C and I got up to stop him, beat his ass when his mom and dad drove up. Brat ran out the door and flung himself to his mother's arm, crying, "Mommy, Mommy, I'm so sorry I left you alone last night, but Grandma needed me." Of course his mother hugged him, and he turned and sneered at C and I. It was scary, the look in that little monster's eyes.